Tennessee This Week from WATE 6 on your side starts now.
And welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Don Hudson. We're looking at several issues this week, as basically we always do every week. But before we get into any issues, let's talk about our panel of pundits. And we are just down to two this week, which means both of you will have more to say. Courtney Piper, our political contributor, and Michael Covington, our industrial consultant. Let's start with this whole special session thing. I mean, it seemed to me, and maybe not to you, out of nowhere when Maryville Republican State Rep Brian Ritchie sent that letter to the governor saying that we can consider all these things in the next real session in January of next year. One little quote from it. It says, the letter said, summoning legislators to Nashville to enact an unconstitutional red flag law will not, as you suggest, referring to the governor, strengthen public safety and preserve constitutional rights. Goes on to say we are not going to violate the Second Amendment. We will not violate the constitutional oath that we took just to get pressured into doing something. First off, just your reaction to the pushback that came out from Ritchie and from others. And Courtney, we'll start with you.
Well, first, I would encourage members of the Tennessee General Assembly to read the Constitution. It would be a really great first start. And second of all, I would tell them tough potatoes. If the governor calls a special session, you have to go. I mean, that is your job. So go to Nashville. That is your job. It's just tough. You might not like it, but you have to do it.
And Michael, I mean, just going to Nashville, though, are we going to get people just going through the motions?
Well, that's really what this is about. The folks that are pushing back on going to a special session don't want to do the work. That's their job, as Courtney said. It was a tough decision when they were in session. I felt like they should have stuck around and gotten the work done, or at least started the conversation in such a way that if the governor decided that there wasn't enough movement, he could call a special session that would have been meaningful. Now they've essentially got to start from scratch. And there are some folks that have dug their heels in. This session may be a muddy mess when it's all said and done, because there's not a commitment to get the job done without the kinds of conditions that are going to make any type of legislation moving forward ineffective. So I'm not convinced that this special session is going to yield positive results for the citizens.
Michael brings up a really good point, and that is the Tennessee General Assembly had the option to stay in session and try to do as the governor instructed them to do, and they chose to not take that option. And the governor certainly made his direction very clear that he wanted to examine some of these red flag laws, and the General Assembly chose not to do that. So, this is the second option, is to come back for the special session. And my message to members of the Tennessee General Assembly that are having a very difficult time with this is to encourage them to do their job.
Do you think that coming back, I mean, they were already in a kind of a volatile, very emotional state. We've stepped away from it. But when they come back, that's just going to restart all over again? That same type of emotion that was going on then, Michael?
It is going to start it all over again from scratch. And you throw into that the fact that the parents of the victims and the families of the victims are reluctant to release information about what is in the Covenant Shooters Manifesto. Right. Well, several of them have said they won't even consider legislation moving forward until they can publicly disclose that information. So we've got a couple of non-starters before they arrive in Nashville. So I don't think that they are going to Nashville with the right mindset in terms of getting something done that will save lives in the future.
It just really shows, and it's really unfortunate, the unwillingness of the Tennessee Republican Party to go to Nashville and enact laws that over 80% of Tennesseans want. Over 80% of Tennesseans want to see some sort of gun safety laws that include these red flag laws. So by going to Nashville, they're actually doing the work that the majority of Tennesseans want them to do. The majority of Tennesseans want these kinds of laws. They want our General Assembly to examine these kinds of laws. They don't want them to sit at home and thumb their nose up at our governor. So, they are there to do the will of the people, and Tennesseans have spoken loudly through several public opinion surveys that they want them to look at these kinds of red flag laws, and so they should go to Nashville and do that.
So we have 2+ months before this is going to happen. So plenty of time for people to read up, study up, whatever it is, make their plans. Do you think that when they gather, will they actually pass some type of law that can walk down that line of not affecting people's constitutional rights, and at the same time making sure that anyone, like the shooter in the Covenant School, that's on doctor's orders or that police are familiar with, that those people will get by law identified?
Yes, it's 100% possible. What's missing is what may be missing, to be fair, is the political will. I mean, from an academic standpoint, from a legal standpoint, from a constitutional standpoint, it is 120% possible. The missing component there is the political will to do so.
Michael?
I at this point, I don't have a lot of confidence in the two sides, Democrats and Republicans, being able to sit in a room and speak reasonably to each other about the types of change that are necessary. If I could ever be convinced that the two sides could sit down and just have a dialogue, I'd have a lot more confidence in this. But again, when you've got a supermajority, the supermajority sometimes does not feel as though they need to listen to the superminority. And therein lies the problem. The supermajority that Republicans have in the state legislature could pass something. Whether the governor would be willing to go along with it with the good faith belief that it's actually going to affect positive change, that's another story. And so I don't have confidence now in the way the legislature is proceeding, because they're not appearing to be reasonable in terms of listening to what the other side's issues are.
And that, Don, will create a tipping point for the Republican Party if they cannot do as Michael has suggested.
And as someone who knows about the PR business, they already went through one, issue, and it didn't look good for a lot of people. In the next 2 months, will they get PR advice to say, hey, just because you're the supermajority, you need to deal with this, if not for no other reason, how you look?
I don't know if they're going to be listening to PR advice, Don, but certainly political strategy suggests that if the Republican Party does not start listening to the will of Tennessee voters in subsequent election cycles, they will have political consequences. It wasn't that long ago where Democrats had a majority in the Tennessee General Assembly. And it didn't just all of a sudden happen one day, oh my God, the Republicans have a supermajority. It happened over the course of about a decade plus. And if the Republicans want to start turning that tide now with how they're acting, it's certainly going to start turning.
And Michael, I want to get back to what you had mentioned. You brought up the manifesto. I was going to bring that up, the shooter at the Covenant Christian School, just so everyone knows what we're talking about. I know a lot of Covenant School parents, at least the ones that are vocal, say they don't want it released. Other people want it released, as you said. Some say it contains information that's too awful, just too much. Others say the public has a right to know what was going on. A judge did say the parents could be involved in the decision. There are a couple of questions here. What will eventually happen, and will this set a precedent if we're going to let victims dictate what information can come out? And I say that with all sympathies. Obviously, I didn't have a student there, but trying to feel like the parents, but at the same time backing up and saying, is that the way we should be moving forward with evidence and information about cases?
We're not going to get around being exposed to what's in the shooter's manifesto. That's going to get out. I have a guess. I have a good, solid guess that there's some things in there that are very painful, that will be very difficult for people to accept. I will say that. We cannot approach this as though we can keep secret something as significant as the motivation for why this individual did this in the first place. So I do kind of understand the legislators who are saying, I need this information available to me to be able to decide the best path to follow. I think that this information is going to get out, and we're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to accept the fact that there is a depth and a breadth to the mental health crisis that leads individuals to this kind of thing.
Courtney, your thoughts?
When we first talked about this, I mentioned that, my default is always kind of the more sunlight, the better, the more sunshine, the better. But then when I listened to some of the reactions from the Covenant School parents and the victims' families, I started thinking, what good can possibly come out of a public disclosure of this crazy person's manifesto? Do I, as a Tennessee citizen, do I need to know what has been said, what has been written, especially if it's going to cause so much pain to so many people that have already been through so much? And it's really hard, because I don't want those families and their loved ones and the victims to go through any more pain and suffering than they've already been through. And there's got to be some sort of balance that you can strike, where the people who need to know can be read in, but it doesn't need to be plastered on the front page of the newspaper or put on the internet.
Yeah, I'm sure that it would offer some insights for a lot of people. We'll see how it gets ruled on and where we go from there. We're going to take a break for a moment and be back with much more. You're watching Tennessee This Week. Tennessee This Week, we're going to now talk about the another state capital issue, basically the third grade retention law. But let's focus in here on Knox County, because that's where we have some numbers. 1,349 students need summer school or tutoring after the second TCAP attempt here in Knox County. Parents are saying that this is causing kids stress, anxiety, depression if they didn't pass. Is this law going to do what it intended to do, or do we need to tweak this law?
This is insane. It's just total insanity. I was at a school board meeting in May where one of the Knox County school staffers came up to the podium and talked to the board about this issue. And she mentioned that there was no evidence to suggest that retaining kids in third grade actually improves educational outcomes. There is absolutely no evidence. So again, the Tennessee General Assembly passed a law which there is no evidence to show that it is helpful to anyone. And it's just absurd. Having one test dictate whether your child moves forward or not is insane. And I say that as someone who had a 3.9 GPA getting out of high school and took lots of AP courses. But then when it came time to take an SAT, I bombed it completely. I took a prep course and I only improved by 10 points. My score in the SAT was a 10-10. I'm a horrible test taker. So I don't think it is fair or any kind of educational best practice to look at one test and decide if a child advances to the next grade level.
And Michael,
they're trying really hard with this, and I appreciate the effort that's being made. The problem in this specific case is these children have only been reading for 2 or 3 years. They started school during COVID. They went through all kinds of political wrangling that impacted their school lives for the first couple of years of their school existence, of their time in school. And so for this test to be creating this kind of anxiety and depression and just upheaval in families is unfortunate. I do understand and I do appreciate the effort that the legislature is making. I do understand that fourth grade is a very pivotal year. So the idea that it had to be implemented this year, I find problematic. Phasing it in, allowing there to be a lot more flexibility in terms of the putting together of the consequences for not reaching certain test levels. They could have phased that in a little bit better. But this is a drastic drain on the psyche of families and children in third grade.
Is what's needed here more than just one standard, also allowing the teachers to maybe be able to overrule? Because I'm going to guess that the teachers, unless they're playing favoritism, and I don't think they want kids to move on that don't know it, but it's like they see what little Sally or little Billy's doing, and where they are, should they have more weight in this instead of just the test? Should it be a 2 or 3 pronged approach in the future?
Yes.
I appreciate that term. I appreciate that term you use, overrule. See, this is about power. And when you put the power back in the hands of the person that educates a child on a daily basis, now you've got something you can work with. The question is whether those teachers will have something imposed on them that will influence their decisions about moving a child or keeping a child back. So again, there's a lot that needs to be fleshed out in this, with the objective being preparing third graders for fourth grade to read at fourth grade level. But to put this mental burden on them just seems like a bit much.
And perhaps I should have been a little bit more fair to the Tennessee General Assembly. I am sure that their goal was to make sure that third graders are reading at level. And bless their hearts, they thought the best way to do that was to hold kids back. But like I said, there was no evidence to suggest that is actually helpful. What we know is helpful are, let's make free summer reading camps available to kids that need that kind of support. Let's offer tutoring. We know those things work. So instead of using resources to hold kids back or have them take a test again and again and again, let's make more tutors available. Let's make free summer reading camps available and do the things that we know that works, that actually supports kids and doesn't cause anxiety and stress.
Yeah, it seems to me that that's, like I said, you're when you have one test or any test, you're going to have that anxiety and stress. But and you can also see where they're saying, hey, we can't let kids keep advancing, because we see this in our education system, not just here in the state, but across the country, where you get kids that are in the 8th, 9th grade into high school and they don't know anything. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but they can't pass any type of test because they've been able to move on and move on. And so, like you said, their heart or their mind was in the right place, but it's like, how do you do that with just coming up with just one test?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's absurd, Don. It's absurd.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up this segment and take a brief break, and then we'll be back with much more here on Tennessee This.
If Ron DeSantis wants to separate himself from Donald Trump, he should stop saying his name. I mean, the name should just be removed from his vocabulary, because that's not helping him any. Also, the more Republicans that join this race, the odds are more in Donald Trump's favor. He has a more loyal following than any of the Republican nominees. And the more nominees that just come in and saturate the field. Back in the day, we used to call this the Stacey Campfield approach, if anybody remembers Stacey Campfield. But the more people that are in the race, the bigger Donald Trump's percentage gets, and the more likely he is to win the Republican primary and become the Republican nominee. So, Ron DeSantis has a big road in front of him. I think he had something like a 30 percentage point spread. Now, anything can happen. That's completely doable. But the more people that hop into this race, the better Donald Trump's odds are. Now, the X factor in that is, if any sort of indictment happens, how would that affect, or would that even affect him? Would it empower and embolden his supporters even more? Or would he have to withdraw from the race? Right. We don't know that, but barring any sort of legal issues, the more Republicans that come in, especially some bigger personalities like Ron DeSantis, the better Donald Trump's odds.
And getting into the pool of candidates, I mean, Larry Elder, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, are these people all running? Do you think they're all running to actually be the nominee, or do you think they're running to maybe become a vice president in this, knowing that even if Trump does win, he can only be in there one term?
I don't really understand why candidates enter the race when they really don't intend to win, unless their objective is to A, get in Donald Trump's ear and potentially be considered as a vice presidential candidate, or raise money. So you can raise a ton of money as a candidate, especially if you're likable, but not 100% credible in terms of getting the nomination. You can raise tons of money, and that money, Courtney can tell you, that money is influential. You can use that money to support candidates in your state. You can increase your power base by making contributions to different candidates. There are a lot of mechanics that are involved in setting up a super PAC to raise money to run for president. And so Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, neither of them really think they have a chance to win the nomination. Mike Pence, if he gets in the race, he's simply raising money. He knows he has no chance to win the nomination, so he has some other objective. Who knows what will happen in a general election? But the way that, as Courtney was saying, the more people enter the race, Trump's going to cruise. Now, court cases, we've seen how that's gone in the past. So right. I think this is going to work itself out just the way we think it will.
Yeah, I mean, he just lost a civil case with, the ramifications are terrible, and yet his numbers haven't really changed, have they?
Not changed.
And he used it as fodder for his campaign. He wasn't ashamed or embarrassed.
Yeah, he didn't know that, woman.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he didn't say a whole bunch about that. Just sticking to that just a little bit more. Does even if Trump wins, the way things are going in the country right now with inflation and other issues, can he beat Biden, or does he have too many things for the independents to vote for him? And does Joe Biden actually make it there? Is Kennedy challenging him? I mean, he's at 24%, I think, like that. Will it for sure be President Biden? Because he's got a challenger, and then he's got his own challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe Biden will be the nominee, pending anything. I don't know. Joe Biden will be the nominee. I don't think the current challenger in the Democratic primary is going to gain much traction. But if this is a Donald Trump, Joe Biden race again, I think the odds are certainly in Joe Biden's favor, because what plays so well for Donald Trump in a primary does not play well for him in a general election. He already lost the popular vote and the election once, and reasons to stand that it will go the same way again if it comes down to a Joe Biden, Donald Trump face-off again.
Michael,
that's a hard question for me, because I'm still not fully clear on how Joe Biden spent the majority of the time in the campaign in the basement of his home, right. But he won by he supposedly got 80 million votes. In a general election, with what we're about to face in terms of ballot harvesting, I'm more concerned about ballot harvesting deciding the national election than I am about the quality of the two candidates that will be in the race. Because ballot harvesting, it's a dangerous proposition. It's as dangerous as mail-in voting.
What is ballot harvesting?
Ballot harvesting is where you can go to a large church and you can essentially, in theory, put a big ballot box in a vestibule somewhere, and you can collect ballots almost as though you are a ballot station, a polling place.
We'll get more information about ballot harvesting so we can make that a topic with all the facts about it and where you can and cannot do that. But as for now, we're running out of time. So we want to thank both of you, Courtney and Michael, for being with us. We'll see you next week on Tennessee This Week.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6 on your side or Nexstar Broadcasting.